5 minutes. One American geologist was in the city that day.
We expected it to end after 10, 15, 20 seconds, something like that, maybe a minute at the most. About minute 3 or 4, we were just all kind of astonished that it just kept going and going and going.
What is different about a big earthquake is that it begins, but it doesn't stop.
We're just looking at each other going, is this over yet? And no, it's not, it's still going. It was kind of a growing realization that it was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it had to be fairly close.
In a nearby park, an American tourist found the ground opening up at his feet. No one has ever filmed this happening before. The footage reveals a characteristic of earthquakes: liquefaction. As the ground is compressed, water is squeezed and forced to the surface.
Okay, we have earthquake right now, and this is actually moving. Can you see the cracks moving? That crack was not there. The crack is getting bigger and smaller, going back and forth. And there is water coming up all over in the park right now. And here's a huge crack. And it's still moving. It's just going back and forth, swaying. It's making me kind of nervous. This land could just go, potentially. I don't know.
In the days to come, scientists would regrade this quake as a magnitude 9. The warning systems worked, and most buildings were still standing. But even before the quake had finished, everyone in Japan knew worse was to come. There were only minutes before a tsunami would arrive. The question now was how many would escape in time. On March the 11th, 2011, the billions Tokyo had invested in quake-proof engineering and early warning systems proved their worth. They saved the city's structures and its people. Then, the tsunami struck. The tsunami was triggered by the explosive energy release of the earthquake, 100 kilometers off the coast. What caused it? Over centuries, the Japanese side of the tectonic fault line had been compressed and dragged downwards by the Pacific plate driving beneath it.
The whole upper plate behaves just basically like a rubber block. It just compresses, and like a spring like this. And when the earthquake happens, it springs back.
The sudden upward flip of such a huge slab of rock lifted a 6-kilometer deep mass of water upwards to the surface of the sea. As it collapsed back, immense waves raced out across the ocean. Not like normal sea waves, more like shock waves from an explosion. Just a meter high, but over 100 kilometers from front to back, and traveling at terrifying speed.
The energy heaved up the sea floor. That displaced a vast amount of water that we can see made it its way on land. It made its way off around the Pacific.
One side of the wave hurtled out across the Pacific. The other side raced towards the coast of Japan.
Tsunamis travel very fast at a speed that depends on the water depth. And because in the deep ocean, tsunami travels very fast, reaching at times the speed of a jet aircraft.
At over 800 kilometers per hour, the wave took just minutes to reach the coast. Here, the shallower sea floor slowed down the front of the wave. The wave's fast-moving rear was still racing in. It began to catch up with the front. The increasing pressure pushed the seawater up into a rising swell. Five kilometers out to sea, a Coast Guard crew captured this extraordinary footage. The tsunami rearing up as the water beneath it grew shallower. Then, when they crested the first wave, a second loomed behind. The swell became a breaking wave as the rear of the wave continues to pile in, sucking in the sea ahead of it.
The very first thing that seems to have happened is that the sea left the land, and some of the footage we've seen shows a huge shoreline being exposed, and then the tsunami built up offshore, and the dynamics of the wave carried it inland. Probably a cubic kilometer of water just splashed landward and kept going until it ran out of steam.
These remarkable pictures caught the moment when the sea pulled back as the first wave roared in. The tsunami had arrived. The wave's effect was strangely unpredictable. At first glance, it seemed there was no discernible pattern to where it struck and when. First came Ofunatu in the north. Then Sendai to the south. And Miyako in the north again. Measurements from tsunami monitoring stations along the coast were equally puzzling. The height of the wave varied dramatically from town to town. But why? The varying depth of the seabed was partly to blame. Where the water was deeper, the tsunami traveled faster and reached land more quickly. Another factor is the complex detail of cliffs, bays, and inlets along the shoreline.
It boils down to how the wave is focused and defocused by the geography or the topography of the coastline itself.
This is Ofunatu, where the wave hit first. Deep water off the coast offered little resistance to the wave. Tsunami warnings did sound, but here there was little time to get to higher ground.
The best early warning system people would have had would have been the fact that there was an earthquake. And people have got used to the fact that if you have an earthquake, there is a possibility of a tsunami that will follow. But in the timescale they had, there was very little time or very little opportunity for escape.
The tsunami hit Ofunatu just 20 minutes after the earthquake.
Water that actually hit the coast will be well in excess of 1 billion, probably 10 billion tons of water. That's a little bit like taking 1 million swimming pools and just emptying them onto the coastal areas of northeast Japan.
15 minutes later,